Hi, I'm Maura, and this is the story of the brunch where my sister humiliated me in front of our entire family, calling me jobless, useless, while having no idea she had just applied to work for me. I stayed silent, but not because I was weak. Ever felt like the people closest to you only see the version of you they created, not who you've become? Before we dive in, tell me, have you ever been underestimated by your own family? What time are you watching this and where are you tuning in from? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to know who's here with me. The sunlight spilled across the cafe table like it didn't know what kind of conversation was coming. Green Lake shimmered outside the window, but all I could focus on was the clink of silverware and the careful way I kept stirring my coffee long after it had gone cold. Elaine and Walter were already there when I arrived. Mom in her beige cardigan and too tight smile. Dad with his newspaper folded like a prop he didn't intend to read. Delilah showed up late, as always, in heels too high for brunch and a laugh too loud for the room. She kissed Mom's cheek, air-kissed Dad's, then slid into her seat like she owned the sunlight itself. "Sorry," she said. "Traffic was awful, and this weather? Seattle, you never change." I didn't respond. I rarely did. They were mid-discussion about someone's retirement party when Delilah turned suddenly toward me, her voice sharper than it needed to be, volume just loud enough to gather attention. "You know," she said with a tilt of her head that made her earrings swing, "it's kinda sad to still not have a real job in your 30s. Like, do you even do anything?" The entire table went still. For a second, even the background clatter of dishes from the kitchen seemed to pause. I felt the heat rise from my chest to my ears, but I didn't flinch. I just looked down and gave my coffee another stir. Elaine gave a small, awkward laugh. "Delilah, don't be like that." Walter cleared his throat, mumbled something about the eggs being undercooked. No one looked at me. Delilah smirked and picked up her mimosa like she hadn't just stripped the room of air. I didn't say a word. That was always the way of things. Let Delilah shine. Let Maura shrink. Keep the peace by swallowing the insult. Let the silence do the healing. Except this time, the silence didn't feel like healing. It felt like cement. By the time the check came, no one remembered what had been said. Or maybe they did, but chose to forget it. The family fell into their usual rhythm, small talk, polite smiles, pretending. I drove home with the windows down, letting the cold wind scrape against my face. I told myself it was just another brunch, just another comment, just another page in a chapter I should have closed long ago. That night, I opened my work laptop like I always did. The screen lit up with familiar dashboards, pending approvals, internal comms. I clicked through until I saw it. New internal applicant, Delilah Horn. My sister. The same one who thought I didn't have a real job. The same one who, hours earlier, had mocked me over pancakes. Attached, a resume filled with fluff and buzzwords, a cover letter that overpromised and underdelivered. She had no idea I was one of the final decision makers. She didn't know I had eyes on every key hire in our department. I hovered my mouse over the approve button. I didn't click. Instead, I rerouted her application to a restricted review queue, a space only I managed. Not rejected, not approved, suspended, like a question she hadn't realized she'd asked. I closed the laptop softly. The skyline outside my window blinked with tiny lights, a mirror of the silence I'd been wrapped in for years. I stood there for a long while, watching my reflection, blurred by the glass, backlit by the quiet power of knowing something no one else did. Let's see how you handle working for a ghost, sister. Monday morning came with rain, as if Seattle knew I needed something soft to fall through. The windows in my condo fogged slightly as I wrapped my hands around the same ceramic mug I used every morning. Same brand of coffee, same playlist humming low from my speakers. It should have been ordinary. I was halfway through clearing my inbox when I saw it. Subject line, Internal recommendation Delilah Horn. I clicked, expecting a forwarded resume or HR reply. It wasn't. It was from Elaine. Not to me, not meant for me, but there it was. Probably sent in haste, a CC gone wrong. Or maybe God just got tired of watching me bite my tongue. She was writing to Walter. "I know Maura works hard," the email read, "but Delilah just deserves this more. She's always had that spark." She called me Maura, not honey or your daughter. Lowercase, like I was a footnote in my own family. But it wasn't the name that hurt. It was the word deserves. I read it again and again, 3 times until my screen blurred from the heat rising behind my eyes. I didn't cry. Not exactly. It was more like something inside me folded in on itself. Deserves. Like I was lucky to be in the room. Like I hadn't built the room. I pushed my chair back and walked into the kitchen. Rain clattered harder on the glass. I watched the streaks crawl down and wondered how many times I had excused things like this. Things that didn't sound cruel until they sat too long in your bones. There was a time I wanted her approval more than anything. I used to bring home awards, little victories, hoping for praise that never came. I remembered my science fair project, working nights on circuits and code. She forgot to come. Said Delilah had a dance recital. When I graduated college, she missed the ceremony entirely. Delilah had a product launch, lip balm, I think. All those moments I tucked under my ribcage, hoping one day she'd see me. That day was not today. I opened my laptop again. HR had Delilah flagged for review, a mid-level analyst position tied directly to our core product. High visibility, sensitive access. I stared at her file, at the same inflated sentences, the confidence that came so naturally to her. She wasn't ready for that seat, and even if she was, she wasn't getting there on my shoulders. I rerouted her track, quietly, moved her to a support department. Still respectable, but no longer central, no longer close enough to damage the thing I had poured myself into. I didn't announce it, didn't justify it. It was a line, drawn in silence. I didn't need to explain it. By evening, the rain had softened. The room felt quieter than before, like it had heard everything I hadn't said out loud. I closed my laptop gently and whispered into the emptiness, not because I needed to be heard, but because I needed to hear it from myself. If they won't see me, I'll show them what it's like to be quietly undeniable. The break room always felt different after hours. Quieter, dimmer, like the building itself had exhaled. I stood by the electric kettle, watching the tea bag bloom in my mug, trying to find a breath that didn't feel sharp. That's when I heard her voice. Delilah's tone carried through the hallway, exaggerated just enough to suggest she wanted it heard. It helps having someone on the inside, doesn't it? A pause. The intern she was talking to mumbled something polite, probably uncomfortable. I didn't move. I didn't need to. I knew the sentence wasn't for him. It was for me. She still didn't know who I was. But she was already using the assumption that I had influence to justify her rise. And now she wanted to claim me without even knowing she was doing it. That was the part that stuck. She was leveraging something she couldn't see, and doing it with a smirk. By the next morning, I noticed the shift. 2 colleagues whispered as I walked by. Another asked if Delilah was being fast-tracked. Her name had started to drift into more conversations than her title warranted. And when someone mentioned her being added to a task force before she'd even hit her 2nd month, I caught the glance they gave me afterward. I said nothing. Not because I didn't care, but because saying anything would have meant acknowledging a storm I wasn't ready to walk into yet. Later that afternoon, I got the system alert. Repeated unauthorized logins, internal roadmap drafts, hiring plans, pre-launch architecture diagrams. I knew exactly whose credentials they were tied to. Delilah. Of course, I didn't forward it to security. I didn't freeze her access. I didn't call her in. I opened the security log, exported the data, and saved it to a folder I had never needed before. I called it contingency, because that's what she had just become. I walked past her cubicle on the way out. She was laughing into her phone, feet kicked up under the desk like she belonged here more than anyone else. She's counting on me to stay small, I whispered to myself as I hit the elevator button. She's going to learn I stopped doing that long ago. Back home, the city looked blurry behind the glass. I sat at my desk, shoulders loose for the first time in days. My phone buzzed. Tobias. His text was simple. You okay? I stared at the words for a moment, then typed back. Not yet, but I'm getting closer. He responded with a single question. Want me to step in? I looked at the city lights, thought about the silence I'd curated, the power I'd learned to fold into my routines. Not yet, I typed. Let her make the next move. The office hummed with low chatter that Friday afternoon, just loud enough to distract, just soft enough to excuse not paying attention. I passed by the glass-walled common space, not meaning to linger, until I heard her. Delilah was in the center again. She always managed to find the center, even when there wasn't one. She stood with a coffee in hand, laughing with a group of newer hires. "I mean, who even is this second founder?" she said, flipping her hair like punctuation. "Probably just a legal stamp, some ghost name to make the brand look balanced." The others chuckled. I didn't move. I didn't walk in. I didn't correct her. But I also didn't forget. Back at my desk, I opened the shared financial document queue, the one I knew she'd be assigned to review Monday morning. I clicked into a quarterly projection report, clean, organized, professional. Then I did something I never do. I signed it, not boldly, not in the header, just in the bottom right corner, embedded in light gray text, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. Maura Ashcroft, CFO, co-founder. It was a fingerprint more than a name, a trace, a warning, if she chose to see it that way. I leaned back in my chair, watching the document flicker under the overhead lights. She wanted to play with shadows. Fine, let her. The rain returned, tapping against the tall windows like it was asking permission to come in. I stayed still, watching droplets collect and run until everything beyond the glass turned into streaks of silver. Somewhere in that blur, I remembered high school. Delilah was voted most likely to shine. Her name in bold, her photo surrounded by silver stars. My name wasn't anywhere, not even as an alternate. I didn't forget because no one ever asked if I wanted to be in the yearbook. They assumed I wouldn't, assumed I didn't belong where spotlights pointed. "You were never meant to see me," I whispered, "but now you have no choice." Tobias appeared beside my desk a few minutes later, holding a closed laptop and that unreadable look he saved for me when he didn't want to push. "You good?" he asked. I smiled without showing teeth. "Let's just say I've left a trail. If she's smart, she'll start connecting the dots." He chuckled, tapping the corner of his laptop. "And if she's not? She'll be surprised on stage." Later that evening, I received the alert I had been waiting for. A document had been opened from Delilah's account, the same file I marked. I imagined her scrolling lazily at first, then pausing, going back. That gray text sitting at the bottom of the page wasn't loud, but it was permanent. I pictured her face the moment her name ran up against mine, subtle but unavoidable. Let the reckoning begin in whispers. It's always louder that way. The group chat buzzed sometime after 9. I was curled up on the couch, feet tucked under me, tea long gone cold on the end table. I almost didn't check my phone. The message was from Dad. "Proud of Delilah for finding her feet again. This company can't be that hard to get into after all." No follow-up, no emojis, no acknowledgement of my role. Not that they knew it, but somehow, even if they did, I doubt it would have changed anything. The chat stayed quiet. No one replied. Not Elaine, not Delilah, not me. Just one line dangling in the silence, like a fishing hook cast into still water. I closed the app without typing a word. I opened my journal file instead. It wasn't fancy, just a long doc I'd started in college and never stopped adding to. A place for thoughts that didn't belong in conversations. Words I didn't want to say out loud but couldn't leave inside me. Tonight's entry was short. "You always clapped for her. I learned to clap for myself." I didn't cry, I hadn't in a while. But there was a tightness in my throat that wouldn't fully leave, like a question I didn't want to ask because I already knew the answer. Tobias called later that night, video only from the shoulders up. I could see he was trying to read my face. "You okay?" I shrugged. "I'm fine." He paused. "Are you sure you don't want to come forward yet?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at him, then looked out the window. "If I do it now," I said, "it'll feel like I'm proving something. And I'm done proving. I don't need them to cheer. I need them to realize." He nodded slowly. "That's honest." We sat in silence for a while before hanging up. There was a time when I thought confrontation meant courage. That if you had something to say, you were supposed to say it loud, right to someone's face. But I've learned, some truths are stronger when they're discovered, not delivered. The most dangerous truth is the one revealed by accident, because then it can't be dismissed as performance. I shut my laptop and turned off the lamp, the room filled with the kind of quiet that lets your mind wander too far. But I stayed grounded. Tobias texted one last thing before midnight. FYI, just got the gala speaker schedule. I clicked the attachment. Scrolled. There it was. Delilah Horn, featured speaker. I stared at it for a long time, my thumb resting on the edge of the screen like I was weighing how heavy the information felt. Then I set my phone down, closed my eyes, let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. So she wants the stage, she can have it, for now. The ballroom at Lake Union shimmered like it had something to prove. Soft golden lights reflected across glass walls, and the water outside moved in lazy ripples, calm, as if unaware that tonight everything was about to shift. I entered through the rear service door. No coat check, no spotlight, no chatter of recognition, just Tobias waiting near the back stairs, holding a slim black folder with my name etched inside. "You ready?" he asked quietly. I nodded, eyes scanning the room from the shadows. The same executives we'd pitched to in hoodies 5 years ago were now sipping champagne in tuxedos. A few of them laughed too loud. The kind of laugh that comes when people are full and a little too proud of themselves. Delilah stood near the buffet, radiant in navy. Her laugh floated through the air like it had RSVP'd on her behalf. She was glowing, rehearsed, the kind of confident that forgets it didn't get there on its own. She didn't know that the night didn't belong to her. Not really. Backstage, she stood just off the curtain. I could see her from across the opposite wing. She was fixing her mic, adjusting her posture, mouthing her opening line again and again. She was ready, or so she thought. I stood still, hands tucked calmly against the folder Tobias had given me. I didn't pace. I didn't speak. I just waited. The announcer's voice echoed gently over the speakers. And now, to open our evening, we welcome one of the visionaries behind our entire system. Delilah stepped forward slightly, expecting her name. Maura Ashcroft. The lights shifted before the air did. I walked forward without looking back. I could feel her freeze, mid-step, just behind the velvet curtain. I didn't need to see it. I felt it. Gasps scattered through the crowd like popcorn. Small, then louder. Whispers followed. I didn't rush. I didn't smile. At the podium, I looked out over the faces, some familiar, some forgotten. All of them watching me now in a way they hadn't before. I don't do speeches, I began. Most of the work we do is silent, so I stayed silent until now. A pause. But tonight isn't about noise. It's about recognizing the things that build quietly and last. I thanked the team, not one name more than needed. I handed the mic back to Tobias, who stepped forward, clapping first. The room followed. There was no mention of Delilah's missed slot, no rearranged agenda, no whisper of where she'd gone. She had vanished from the lineup like she had never been on it. From the corner of my eye, I saw her in the wings, frozen, makeup perfect, posture breaking. We locked eyes for 2 seconds. Nothing passed between us. No apology, no anger, just understanding. Then she turned, walked away before anyone noticed she hadn't spoken. Some spotlights don't need to be taken. Some are simply reclaimed. The office felt different the next morning. Quieter, as if the gala had left behind something heavier than confetti and applause. Delilah didn't say much. She kept her eyes low, her voice lower. Her heels still clicked across the floor, but the confidence in each step had softened into something almost hesitant. No one mentioned her missed speech. They didn't have to. Absence has its own kind of volume. I came in late on purpose, hours after the buzz had settled into routine. My desk greeted me with unread messages and a blinking icon on the internal system, a sign that something was being reviewed. I clicked. System access logs. Delilah's user ID. I watched as her trail unfolded. File after file, budget after budget, each bearing the name she never expected to find. Mine. Dozens of documents, all signed off by Maura Ashcroft. There it was. Proof in grayscale. Not dramatized, not declared, just there. She had been looking for answers, and now they surrounded her. I didn't need to see her face to know what it looked like. Eyes wide, shoulders dropped. The tremor in her fingers when truth hits not like a strike, but a slow, sinking realization. I leaned back in my chair. Funny how silence can echo louder than applause. In my mind, I could almost hear her rewinding. Childhood afternoons where she performed pirouettes in the living room while I finished homework in the kitchen. School assemblies where she soaked in attention while I waited for the bell to ring. Birthday dinners where she made wishes out loud, and I kept mine quiet. She was praised for shining. I was praised for not needing to. Maybe she thought that was a compliment. That afternoon, I returned to my desk after a meeting and saw something unfamiliar sitting atop my keyboard. A notebook, soft navy cover, simple, closed. I hesitated before picking it up. Inside, one page, one note. You don't have to forgive me. I just needed you to know. I see you now. No name, but the handwriting needed no introduction. I held it for a moment, reading it again and again. It didn't feel like closure. It didn't undo anything, but it was something. I opened my drawer and placed the notebook beside the other things I keep there. Things that remind me who I am, not who they told me I was. Then I whispered to no one. It's not about being seen anymore. It's about no longer needing to be. And for the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt free. The cafe looked exactly the same. Same checkered napkins, same faded chalkboard menu, same hum of espresso machines and distant forks clinking against porcelain. But something about the table felt different. They were already seated when I arrived. Elaine chatting softly, Walter with a newspaper folded into a perfect square, Delilah silently sipping her orange juice. No one looked up when the door opened, but they all noticed when I sat down. I hadn't been invited. I hadn't said I was coming. I just showed up. Elaine blinked first. Her eyes darted toward me, then to the pitcher of water. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted it and filled my glass. First, not Delilah's, not her husband's, mine. No one commented, not even Delilah. But I felt the weight of it, heavy and fragile at the same time. A gesture too small to mean anything, or maybe it meant everything. I didn't touch the glass. They talked about traffic, a storm in the Midwest, some new series on Netflix none of them had actually watched. The words felt like wallpaper, flat, polite, forgettable. No one asked me how work was going. No one mentioned the gala. No one spoke of the silence Delilah had worn like a mask for the past week. And she didn't speak at all. She barely looked up, except once, when my elbow brushed the table and made my glass tremble. Our eyes met for a second. Then she looked away. I think that was the moment I knew I was ready. I folded my napkin neatly and placed it beside my untouched plate. The scrape of my chair against the floor pulled every gaze to me at once. Elaine froze. Walter looked over his glasses. Delilah flinched like she expected a scene. But there wasn't going to be one. I'm not coming back here, I said softly. I just came today to remind myself I was never the one who needed fixing. There were no gasps, no protests, just air, thick and unbreathable. And then I walked out. Behind me, no footsteps, no plates clattered. The cafe carried on. Outside, the light had shifted. The clouds had moved just enough to let a sliver of sun find my face. Through the window, I could still see them. Elaine's eyes were glossy, but she stayed in her seat. Walter cleared his throat and looked down at the menu. And Delilah just watched me walk away. For the first time in my life, no one followed. The light filtering through my curtains wasn't as sharp as it had been the week before. It was soft, muted, like even the day understood that I needed a slower start. My phone lit up on the nightstand. Tobias. You okay after Sunday? I stared at the message for a few seconds, let the words settle. Then I turned the screen over, face down. I didn't need to reply. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because everything I needed to say had already been said. By standing up, by walking out, by not looking back. The silence that followed was my answer. By Tuesday, I had returned to the office. The hallway chatter remained. Coffee still brewed in the break room. The elevators still dinged too slowly. But something had shifted. Delilah was still here, still employed, still sitting 2 rows down from my office, but quieter now. She no longer dominated rooms. She listened more, took notes, looked people in the eye when they spoke, instead of waiting for her turn to speak. And no one mentioned the gala, not to her, not to me, but I could feel it every time someone held my gaze a little longer than before, their respect no longer casual. I didn't bask in it. I didn't crave it. I simply moved through it, like sunlight, warm but untouchable. That night, I opened the same document I'd been writing in since I was 21. My journal, a digital thread of every thought I was too afraid to voice. I wrote one line: "Closure isn't erasure. It's choosing not to reopen the wound again." I saved it without reading anything else. The next morning, a letter was waiting in my mailbox, handwritten, no return address, but I knew the writing before I even opened it. Inside was a single sentence: "You've always been steady. I just didn't know how to see stillness as strength." No signature, but it didn't need one. I placed the letter in the same drawer as the Navy notebook, next to the thank you card I never responded to, and the pen I never lent back. Later that day, I walked past the brunch cafe without planning to. My feet just turned that direction. Through the glass, I saw them. Same table, same awkward dynamics. Elaine talking too fast. Walter sipping his coffee like it bored him. Delilah staring at a half-eaten croissant. They looked smaller. Not in stature, but in weight. The power they used to carry over me had faded. Or maybe I had just stopped letting it attach. I stood there for a moment, then smiled. Not out of joy, not out of triumph. Just a quiet acknowledgement. Some distances aren't meant to be closed. Some are meant to be understood. I walked on. Sometimes silence doesn't mean weakness. It means choosing peace over performance. I used to think I needed to be loud to be seen. But now, I know there's power in letting go, in walking away with your dignity intact. You don't always have to fight to prove your worth. Sometimes, the quietest decision can be the loudest statement. So tell me, have you ever had to walk away from something just to find yourself again? Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? If this story touched something inside you, drop a 1 inch in the comments, or let me know where you're watching from. And if it didn't, I'd still love to hear your thoughts. What didn't land for you? What would you have done differently? If you're new here and this story resonated with your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel. We've got more true stories that speak to the quiet battles, the everyday strength, and the moments we finally decide, enough is enough.